then yearly salary is, like 3.6 lakh. So in India, anyone who makes more than 3 lakhs is in the top 10%. And if you are an assistant professor, you get PhD, so how much they make?
60,
70. So if you make 70, that is like 8 lakhs. But to be in the top 1% in India, it is only 6 to 7 lakhs. So you should be happy how privileged you are in your society, right?
There are 3 groups, LIG, MIG and HIG. And to be in higher income group, your annual salary must be greater than 12 lakhs.
No, I'm not talking of taxation. I'm talking of percentiles. Top 1%, top 2%, we are not worried about whether it is good or bad or whether you pay taxes or not.
No, I am saying that in that 1%, the salary must be greater than 12 lakh per annum.
Whatever that means, yeah, I think. So the idea is you can Google it, yeah. So it's not a thing we have to debate, right? But the idea is that you can Google it and then you can find different metrics for what it means. But roughly, most of you are at least nothing else in the top 10%. And probably some of all the professors or PhD students, very soon you'll be in the top 1%. So because yesterday when we talked about it, people say we are in the bottom 1%. So that shows how irrational that statement is. How irrational. Because you are saying you have nothing and you are in the bottom without thinking. So the purpose of teaching was to make sure that when you make a statement, you have done your homework. Right? And then you write that what counts for government and for taxation. So you can find different metrics. Somebody could say how much net worth you should have. Net worth means that how much money you have in the bank and everything in your savings. And then what does it mean to be in the top 1% in India based on the net worth? But you can do the same thing in United States, or you can do it in Israel, or in Japan, or in South Africa. It doesn't really matter. So you are very privileged people, right? To be in the top 1%, that means you have a tremendous responsibility to think about the other 99%, right? And then you have to see how you can take advantage of that and how you can accept the responsibility to be in the top 1%. So let's continue what we did yesterday. So that was tutorial. So let's see if I can go there. So that was tutorial 3. And I think, let's see which slide we were showing last time. So maybe we can a little bit review. So remember, like we showed this slide yesterday? You remember? So what's the difference between, say, 3.8 sigma and 6 sigma? Or you can make 7 sigma. So higher is the number for sigma, means that fewer problems are there. And this is very discrete way of thinking. Something is good or something is bad. We have been teaching in these courses that those are not the right words to use. You don't want to think in success or failure, good and bad, rich or poor, because that has no meaning. Who's rich and who's poor, right? Is 10% means that you're poor. So that somebody will say, oh, that means very rich. You're in the top 10%. And then we said that there are 6 steps for 6 sigma. And you can apply them for any situation in your home, in your personal life. So anytime you say, I have a problem, then first question always is how do you define the problem? Then once you define it, then we cannot communicate whether you have solved the problem or not. You have to know what was the metric and what was the measure before and what is the measure after. So you have to know how it has changed. If you don't know the metric and you don't know how to measure it, then we can fight with each other. Nobody knows whether you have improved or you have degraded the system. So measurement for discussion purpose is important, but not that end objective is not to measure things, but fundamentally to improve things. And typically in life, what you can measure doesn't mean that is important. There are a lot of other things that are important in life. So then we can redefine how did you pick a project and then what kind of things you do in each step. So then the first important thing is what is critical to quality. CTQ means, remember we talked about Pareto. Who was Pareto? Remember we talked about Pareto. Who was he? I'm sorry, sir. Who was Pareto? So we talked about this person, P-A-R-E-O. So sometimes in engineering problem solving, people say, oh, let's do Pareto analysis. So Pareto was the Italian economist. He studied wealth distribution. So like we were talking of yesterday, concentration of wealth. So he was able to quantify it. Otherwise people could say rich are rich and poor are poor, but you have to then measure everything and then make a distribution, and then you can visualize it. And then you could say where is the top 1% and where is the, so 1% typically in reliability we call it B, you could in tail sense you're B99. That means you're 99th percentile, right? 1% is here. Then this will be B90%. So that means 10% is here. Median may be somewhere here, right? So this would be then B50. Median. Average would be more than median or less than median? More than median. Very good. Because of this long tail, so all the rich people, if you add their income, right? So if you go to Reliance Brothers, each one of them this year may make $1 billion, right? So then the average would be very high. So then the average is the first moment. So like when you use the word average, so if nothing else, you remember this idea. So mathematically, that is the expectation. E stands for the expectation of the random variable, and that is the first moment. So how do you calculate the first moment? First moment means is that you take x, then multiply it by the whatever is the function, and then you integrate over all of x. So this is also same as CG, right? Remember, CG is the center of gravity. So that's a very simple metric. And then our idea was that more bigger average is compared to the mean, that means more skewed the distribution is. So in India, if average is high and median is small, that shows there is not good distribution of that. Then you analyze it, and then you improve it. So how do we improve it? Like this idea that you do priority. So that is like Pareto analysis. You make a list, and then you rank things, and then you say which are important causes. So like we talked about, somebody says, how do we improve things in India? Then you say you have to focus on the causes, right? Why there are problems. And then you can focus on all the causes. So then we could say, what is cause 1? So if there was one thing Modi should do this year, question is what should that be? Are 2 things, or 3 things, or 4 things? So you can rank them. You can only rank them. Idea is in a company, may not be in a society, if you can measure things. And if you have defined what your problem is. So if you haven't defined your problem, of course, you cannot solve the problem. You can do a lot of things haphazard way. One day do one thing, next day do one thing. You'll be doing many contradictory things. One day do something, next day you contradict what you did today. So then all those issues will be there. And then you improve it. Then you want to sustain it. So like if you come up with a new public policy or come up with a new executive orders in a university or in a company, then the idea is that you want to control it. The word control means that you have a statistical stability. System suddenly is not moving up and down a lot. And then most important step is that you can transfer the technology. Says where else can you apply these improvements to maximize return through transfer of technology. So technology transfer is a big idea these days. So then you can see this is more details, and all of this information is in your material. So if it is of interest to you, then you can go to your library, and any word that is here, then you can find a book on that word, and then you can do further research. Design for Six Sigma is more of a philosophy than a problem-solving tool. So like we have been teaching more like design idea, system. That's why we have been always using the word system, India, and so on. So focus on the system, not on solving a problem. Because unless you improve the system, you cannot improve anything, right? Sometimes we say people work in a system, right? All of you work in some system, whether in your home or in university or in this country. But then the job of the leadership is to work on the system. You work in the system, somebody has to work on the system. That means to improve fundamentally the system. The system means understanding all the interrelationships of all the components and on, and then how to reconfigure it, change it, so that you are able to improve quality, productivity in the system. And then we have been emphasizing this word, right? You always want to be proactive. So typically when we teach courses to, companies and CEOs or vice presidents, one of the ideas you say, go back to your office and look at your calendar and see what you do every day. If 80% of the time you are solving problem, that means you cannot be a good leader, right? Every day you are just fighting fires. So if all we do is fight fires, then we cannot prevent a fire, right? So somebody has to spend the time to prevent the fire, not just saying that we are going to keep on fighting the fire. That's the basic idea. Make sense?
Yes, sir.
Is there anything contradictory? Typically happens is as human beings, nobody in this world can be consistent. I think I might have mentioned briefly, last century there was a mathematician, so his name was Gödel, and he was very, very famous. He was a little bit, people said he was crazy, and he died in a mental institution and committed suicide. So he was able to prove that any time you have finite number of axioms, you will always get a contradiction if you permute them. So like in mathematics, people always have been struggling. So we have axioms, how to add 2 plus 2, right? What are the rules? But then you get into trouble when you use 0 and infinity at the boundary, right? So 2 plus 2 is 4, but what is infinity plus infinity? Yeah, so that doesn't make sense. It should be 2 infinity, no? So like I have a one shoe, of infinite number of them, right? Then I have a 2 pair of shoes. So the pair infinite should be better than 1, right? Intuitively. So we get contradiction. Then mathematicians worry, oh, there is not one kind of infinity. One infinity is bigger than another infinity. So then as soon as you understand contradictions are very good, because they show that your assumptions are flawed, your models are wrong, your thought process is not correct. So that typically will happen in any society. One day your parents will tell you to do one thing, or your teacher will do. Next day they'll tell you the opposite. So you say, oh, teachers are no good, my parents don't understand. They told me yesterday to go there, today they said, no, please don't go there. So it is a contradiction. And contradiction is because human beings don't have infinite numbers, axioms to deal with and understand it. Most of us cannot even deal with one number, forget about, millions of numbers. So that weakness is built in that weakness is not that we are contradictory people, it is because of the limitations of mathematics, logic that we are using, the sciences that we are using. So we can go through these fast. I think you get a basic thinking of what is the design for Six Sigma. Then in design for Six Sigma, people have steps. Again, they are very similar. You define it, you measure it, you analyze it, then you design your system, then you verify the system, then you release it to the customer, and on and on. So the basic idea is always the focus is on upfront a research. So the quality should be done at research level, not at manufacturing level. In most of the developing countries, when somebody says, oh, I work in quality control, say at Maruti or Hindustan Lever, what you think people think you do? Inspection, audits. People are working, you tell them, hey, bhaiya, you're doing something wrong. So focus is on output and not on the system. So that way, they will always be fixing problems. They will never, 100 years from today, you go to Tata's local company, they'll still be fixing problems. When I was there, they were fixing problem. Today, they are fixing problem. Every day in the factory, there is a crisis, right? You talk to the plant manager, you can't talk. He's so busy to fix something. So that's the concept. So it says that design for Sigma had roots in systems engineering. So what system, like we have been teaching in this course, take a holistic approach. You don't want to become very myopic in your thinking. So we like mentioned statement, even if you are acting locally, but you must understand globally. Even if you do something yourself in your home, but think impact of that on whole India. What is the global impact, or at least maybe what is the national impact of what you are doing. So like lot of ideas of a production, then people can take the idea of Six Sigma and then combine it with like a lean system. So Toyota Motor Company popularized how to make cars in a very efficient way. So then you could say, oh, we can combine Six Sigma and we can combine lean production together. That way you can combine hundreds of methods together. So then people could call it Lean Six Sigma. And so there are many, many names in Japanese or in every language. What are some of the things that people do? Again, the objective is to be proactive. That means to get the right things to the right place at the right time, the first time, and while minimizing waste and being
Open to change.
open to. You always have to be open to change. Any person that says, don't talk to me, I know what to do, right? Or you say, this is how we have done things for 100 years or 50 years, you know there'll be problems. Then you cannot improve. So that's the basic idea. These are like distinction between Six Sigma and design for Six Sigma. So this is, I think, typically what this material here we can, anytime you talk about quality, just like we have been debating in our class, I ask you a problem, so we don't know what the problem is. They always say what it is, always ask this question, what, why are you asking me, where you should do it, in your home or at the university, when you should do it, and then how you should do it. And typically in universities, we can teach you the science of how to do things. We cannot decide for you what, why, where, and when. We can give you a philosophy. So you can see, when we teach, we can only teach certain quantitative things. And then a lot of things are very deep, personal. And that is your judgment to make. So that's the basic idea. So this is the, I think yesterday we talked about prevention, and we said there is a lot of old wisdom, and many times people say there is a contradiction. Like we could look at a couple of things. So this statement says, stick to your knitting. So that means you become more focused person. You do not do too much. A different thing. But then people say, don't put all your eggs in one basket. You should diversify. So which is good? Should I diversify or should I just do one thing? Right? So in reality, there is no contradiction. But if you just listen to this or listen to this without understanding the next objective, next purpose, then you will say there is a contradiction. Make sense? So you say that somebody says you should always take a return. But then we say the worst risk is not to take a risk, right? You have to take a risk in life. So that looks like as if it is. It says, he who hesitates is lost in life, right? If I hesitate, I had opportunity, but I didn't follow it. But then it says, you have to be very careful before I leap, right? So if I'm very careful, maybe I won't jump. So, but the contradiction isn't there if you think in a global sense. So sometimes we say nothing is more demotivating to people. That means you're doing a very fine job, you're working so hard, but you're doing a fine job of implementing the wrong thing. So if the system in a country, in an organization, in a university is not right, right means is that it doesn't follow our wisdom or our understanding, then people are working very hard every day. But you'll find that in that company, that organization, people are very frustrated. Everybody has frustrations, and they're always struggling and fighting and irritated with each other. And they cannot comprehend. If you teach them something ideal, they say, no, mere paas time nahi hai, no. So they're always fighting these things. So that's why you need principles. So sometimes we talk about 10 principles that you can apply them to your own life, or you can apply them to manage quality. When I use the word quality, that means any quality, whether it is reliability or safety or durability or resilience or robustness, doesn't really matter. You can apply it anywhere. So first idea was that you should always focus on the customer, user, people who are affected by the product. Make sense? Because you're impacting somebody, and if you just sit and do something without understanding how this policy is impacting millions and millions of people, it won't be a good strategy, right? Other is that you always focus on system. So we have words like synergy. Do you know what this word means?
Synergy. No, sir.
No? Yeah. Most important thing is, let's supposing you can do something, right? But we are dealing with systems, so I put you in partnership with him. So now there are two of you. Now the question is, system will only make a system is 1 + 1 is greater than 2. So he said there should be a positive synergy. Otherwise, there's no reason to have a system. Like, why do we have India and 1.34 billion people? Everyone could have their own country. My home is my country. So the idea is that because we are collective, it is better, not worse. You could say it is worse because we are fighting and we have a bad system and we are always aggravated. So idea in a company is that 1 + 1 is greater than 2.
1 + 1, 11.
1 could be 11, yeah, could be 11, could be anything, yeah, very true, yeah. So idea is the synergy means is that when you have, you design a system, there is something new happens that was never there, based on interactions and interdependence. She says, oh, there's such a positive synergy. If like we're married, there's a positive synergy. But then there could be negative too. You could always keep fighting, right? So then it won't be very productive. So that's the idea of synergy. What does this word holistic mean? It's a very similar idea that you think about the whole, like in medicine or anything, and not just say, I fix your heart, but I don't worry about something else. Then you won't be able to help a person that much. And you always focus on the process, because systems consist of processes. So you always focus on the process. Because process means you have input, output, input, output, input, output. Here things go to there, there go to there, and so on. Then we focus on a hierarchical structure. Remember we have been talking, yesterday I gave example of some of you here about Alexander and how his general came and they retreated. Then the whole country's future got changed. So there is an hierarchical structure, cause, effect, cause, effect, cause and effect. Then you always understand means and ends. Means and ends, right? You have some end, but then it says what tools, what methods you are going to achieve the ends. And then for every mean, you have an end, then every end becomes a mean for something else. You want to be happy, for you to be happy, you need money, right? So then money is the end. You could say, oh, I go to work, even if I don't like it, right? So means and ends, means and ends. Cause and effect, yesterday we talked about, that is similar to the notion of, what was the Indian word we used? Karma, right? There's a causation. And anytime you do something anywhere, it doesn't disappear. It will come and haunt you. Not just you, but everybody in the system. Everybody in the system. If you look at a big engine in a Boeing airplane or anything, even if somebody makes a tiny mistake and there's one small screw for the blades, they don't tighten it properly, it will result in something very, very bad. So that's the idea. And then focus always is on the future. Sometimes we are so focused on the past that even past you don't know, history people don't know, but the focus is always on the future. And you always focus on forever improvement. Make sense? And then we focus on strategic planning based on prevention. And then we say here is that it is good, at least this is one way of thinking, in Western societies, we take a lot more of a scientific approach. What is science? understanding cause and effect, and then you develop the understanding through experimentation, and then you can develop mathematical a relationship. It is not based on anecdotal approach. Many times people copy something, but they have no idea. Somebody says, oh, this person did very well in life, but what principles that person used, not that it is an anecdote. America does that, India can do that. You cannot improve India just based on an anecdote. You have to understand what exactly are the scientific principles that one country is adopting, and so on. You can always implement the science, but you cannot implement anecdotes. So that's the thought process. So you always focus on integration. So the idea is you cannot take a company in America did something wonderful and they made a lot of money. So you can say, oh, in India we can do the same thing. It won't work. Why? Because people are different, culture, like is different, habits are different, beliefs are different, so it won't work. So then you have to integrate the science with the local cultural issues, habits, beliefs, and so on. And then last thing we do is we try to promote understanding of the transformation. So this is like a pyramid. So if you look at the pyramid, so most of the professors at like who are doing research, they're always generating a lot of data, right? If you're a PhD student, you're doing so many experiments and collecting data. You go to the library and collect data. But what is the purpose of data? Data doesn't help you make good decisions, but from data you have to extract, analyze it and extract information. Information, I could give you 1 million numbers, but how will you use them? So you say, oh, what is the information in these 1 million numbers? So that's why, 20 years ago, we had whole word called IT. So that meant that all the technology that focuses on creating information. But today, we say, what is the purpose of information? Is to create knowledge. So now, many companies, we focus on knowledge management, right? So then you can see that you could make this pyramid. So then it says, this is information, then this is knowledge. We haven't gotten to the next word is wisdom. So like yesterday we talked about Einstein. We say, oh, Einstein has a lot of knowledge about the universe, but doesn't mean he's a wise person. For somebody who cannot treat their wife well, or children well, or other people well. So that means they cannot be. And then the idea is whatever you want to put at the top. That means, so ultimately the purpose of science always is to find the ultimate truth. And we'll never find the truth, like philosophically. So that's where then you get in the realm of faith or religion, whatever words you use. Because you never get there, because the universe is too big for us to understand, right?
We cannot prove it logically.
Yeah, we cannot prove it logically because there is no way for us to understand. Some people say, like if Big Bang happened 16 billion years ago, so if 16 billion is like 1 hour, human beings arrived last 5 seconds. So somebody who arrived last 5 seconds, how could they understand the whole hour, right? That's the idea. It says this is impossible. It's like almost pretending a small organism somewhere on some planet in some galaxy. So I can understand the universe. Or in Earth, mosquito is a very smart, life form, right? They evolve and they learn. You try to kill them, they figure out how to fight you. But, mosquito says, I'll figure out what this universe is all about. But it will be very hard, right? So only issue is that human beings are very arrogant, and they think they know what the science will say. If you have deep thinking, it says that cannot be. If with such a tiny knowledge, how could I pretend everything? Yeah, that's the thought process. So we can go through these ideas fast, and I think this gives you some idea. This we can skip because we have done it before. So then the next topic, now you can see we can apply the Six Sigma. We can talk a little bit about education. So that was what lecture 7 and 8 was all about. So let's see if I can. Before we go back to lecture 7 and 8, anybody has a question? Anything I have said that bothers you? You think it is very contradictory, or it is very wrong, or very flawed? What you think? Something that you completely don't agree. It's okay to talk. That's okay. So what you think? What bothers you the most? No, he's afraid.
If you do not define the Torah correctly, do not, suppose I do not take the actual cause in my study, then the whole scenario will be different. Because I don't take the main cause, or I don't understand what is the cause, and the whole study will be not fruitful, which will waste of time. So I think I should be very careful about what is the cause and initial condition to define the problem.
Very good, very good. Thank you. What do you think? Is there something bothers you a lot? What I've been doing or saying?
Sometimes we try to match the theoretical equations and logics with the experimental data what we have through the experiments. And sometimes we find that there is a lot of difference in that. And then we believe that either the logic is having some problem or we have done something wrong with the experiments. So I think that's me a lot.
Oh, okay.
How we can rectify the problem, the actual problem.
Okay, I was more looking for something that bothers you. Bothers means you are upset because I said something. That's what I was looking for. How about you guys? What do you think? Nothing bothers you? No? Why? You're not thinking?
No, sir. I haven't heard something that bothers
you. Okay. That can be good and bad, right? So one of the important things we teach is that always challenge the professor. Always challenge the professor, right? That's the only way to learn, is to challenge the professor. So we can talk briefly. You don't need a break right away, right? No. So we can talk about like TQM. TQMs, I think we didn't cover, but we'll briefly talk about. What happened is before, when people talk about quality, they said quality is meeting standards or specification or making something good. But that was very partial. They realized that the system has, now we are teaching that infinite qualities. You cannot just focus on hardness of this material and say, oh, it meets the standard, it is a good pen. This pen has many qualities, material, chemical, like what kind of ink we use, the fiber that I use here, manufacturing processes, this cap, all the tolerances that you put in. And then if this thing is a little bit smaller than what it should be, when you close it, it won't be a tight fit. And then it will dry up in one day, right? So tomorrow I'll come to teach, the pen won't work. So there are many, many qualities. So in 70s, people realized that we should focus on all the qualities. So that's the word total meant. Total meant is that we are so sorry that as professors we were teaching you wrong things in the past. But today we think we have become smarter and we teach you total. But the word total has no meaning because, if today I say I teach you total and we believe in continuous improvement, what will I teach you tomorrow? Total of the total. So you can see it doesn't have any meaning. So we should always have a holistic thinking, always have totality of everything. Not today I teach you that, but we should do that always.
Continuous increment is there every day.
I'm sorry, sir?
Means every day new information is
New information, but you always focus on the totality of everything. Today you're not smart enough to understand the totality of everything, right? But maybe in future. So if you do something wrong on Earth, you think we affect Mars? You don't go that deep, right? So that's okay. So we're going to then say what is education and then how these kind of ideas you can apply it in education. So that was the motivation for this section. So first, like we do with the word quality, and I briefly commented on that. So first thing you should always do is look for the word in the dictionary. And then like if you are in Hindi dictionary, you could go back to Sanskrit and you could say, 3,000 years ago, what did somebody meant when they were saying about education? So that's the idea. It says the word education is derived from educare, that's the Latin word. English mostly comes from Latin, just like many Indian languages and Germanic languages, they come from Sanskrit, right? So it says that education means to bring up something, or related to educare means to bring out. That means you want to bring out something in a student, right? A curiosity or what thing, or bring forth what is within somebody. Maybe there is a lot of things that are inside you, but somehow you don't know how to bring them out. So you can see a lot of words. And then it says, bring out potential of a person. And the second part of educare means to lead a person. So anytime we do education, objective is not to teach you how to follow, but so that even you become future leaders. So learning how to lead is important, and every person is a leader, right, in different ways. It's like you could say there's a hierarchy. So your leadership potential or impact may be less than Modi's impact, but every person is a leader. So it says education in the largest sense is any act or experience that has a formative effect on mind, character, or physical ability of the individual. In a technical sense, what we do is, so you can see that one generation learned something, we have some wisdom, then you want to impart the wisdom to the next generation and next generation. So that is like schooling or teaching. But more important is when I impart the information, you want to make sure that you're imparting the right information. So that's why the biggest job of a professor, like in a top university, is not to teach or disseminate knowledge, but biggest impact is to create knowledge. Because how can you teach if you can't create knowledge? Make sense? So lower you are in the hierarchy, then you're more focusing on teaching. Higher up you are, then these professors are the ones who are creating knowledge. They created knowledge 100 years ago or 200 years ago, and today you start teaching it in your university. So if you don't create knowledge, that means what? In future, professors will have nothing to teach, right? What will they teach? No new knowledge has been. For years, there was very little growth in this society. So some people say, how come, society was not making big impact compared to, like all of you know that last 50 years, how much growth we have, right? Exponential, how much new knowledge we have created, new potential we have created. Last 50 years is a lot more than, maybe 100 times more than the 50 years before that and 50 years before that. So one conjecture is that a long time ago, people didn't live that long. So then, generation and to the next generation. So it's like you're a mosquito. You think mosquitoes, they hardly live. Some may live, couple hours, some may live couple days, and then they die. They have no opportunity to tell their grandchildren, hey, don't bite this person, or go and breathe in this water, right? So they'll be doing the same thing for millions of years, and certainly haven't become they are smart in their own way, but they haven't evolved just like we have evolved over hundreds of thousands of years. You follow? So that's the purpose of education, is to, because if some societies have knowledge, some people feel about India, maybe there was knowledge 3,000 years ago, but it was never disseminated. And for you to disseminate, you have to document it and write it, right? So that's why in a university, you have to publish papers. If you don't publish paper, then means I cannot impact other people. Yes, but that's just a fly, right? No mosquito on your head. Yeah, okay. So the idea is that you have to document it. That's why publication is very, very important in academia, at least. May not be. Even in a company, it is very important, because if, say, some group or factory in Tata, they don't document their knowledge, then they could hire the best engineer from IIT. The person has to relearn. They'd be wasting so much time. Every new young graduate from IIT doesn't know too much, right? So the companies hire them, then they send them for training for another 6 months, right? So it is not very effective. So if company can document all the knowledge that they had before, then the new person can just read it, and then they can start doing wonderful things. So that gives you some idea what is many times ordinary people, don't understand what is the role of education. Typically parents will say, oh, just teach my kid, but they have no clue what are you teaching, right? I remember I went to Ramjas school in Delhi, so I was in 7th grade, so they started teaching science. So our book, had that the mass of Earth is so much, there was a number. So the teacher says, don't believe this book. Nobody has the ability to develop a scale and weigh the Earth, And so this number has no meaning, because who will be able to weigh the Earth, right? It's so huge. So you can see the paradigm there is, he's stuck that only way you can measure something is by weighing it, but not through scientific principles. You can infer a lot of things, right? So that transition the person hasn't made. And though they are teachers, I'm sure there are teachers like that even today in villages, right? So once a myth is created, then it is very hard to undo. It is very hard to teach people who didn't learn things right the first time. Because then hardest job is how to undo it. Because if you want to undo it, you will fight me, right? So you have certain age, and I tell you, hey, the way you do things is not correct. What will be your instinct? You say, who are you? And I want to do things my way. You become very, very defensive.
But if someone wants to learn, he can learn.
Someone lot, but the human instinct is to defend it. Anytime you say something, people defend them. They say, no. This is how we do that. Yeah, you're right. Yeah. But there are very few people who could make that transition. So that's why every society, they are very defensive, right? So if you go to somebody, say Muslim in Middle East or Pakistan, you say, hey, this doesn't make sense. What will they do? They'll fight you. And they will even kill you if you say something. So you can see they defend it. So you could say, how come you think Muslims are not intellectuals? Of course they are. But they get stuck. They get stuck. Yeah, they get stuck. So it's very hard to undo it. Because they'll keep on fighting. So they're stuck. But then the challenge is, let us say that we made that mistake, but how you can prevent it for future generations. And you can even imagine yourself, most of you are very smart, that what people are teaching to billion people in India, in school, and what logic they are teaching them, and what thought processes they are teaching them. And then the idea is that you want to teach people a capability, a capability, let's see, we go back. So we were here, the capacity to adapt and apply, the fundamental knowledge. And the most important thing, which typically, even in United States, we don't do very well, is teaching people how to challenge the assumptions. So people can write a physics book or biology book, and it is based on a certain set of assumptions, and nowhere those assumptions are written, and you cannot even challenge them. So the way new ideas come is not from following the book, but by challenging the assumptions. So that's like you say Einstein, he just challenged the assumptions. You could say, oh, Newton is so famous and Newton is so smart, so I should just stay with F equal to ma, right? So you learn to challenge the assumption. And how you teach people, many societies do the opposite in education, right? They teach their students, just keep repeating these words, right? And then you cannot have critical thinking, right? So you just keep repeating these words. I mean, we don't want to criticize any one country. So like sometimes people say, like in a madrasa, if you go in Pakistan or Afghanistan, so you just keep repeating things that, at least to us, is not correct. But then these kids, who knows what they'll do when they grow up, right? So that's the idea, because there is no focus on critical thinking. And some people are offended by critical thinking. Make sense? Because critical thinking means that somehow I'm challenging you. So you say, your parents will do the same thing. Who are you to think in this way? So they will tell you not to think in a certain way, because it is very, very, offensive to them. It upsets their life. If you say, oh, I tell you, your life is a lie. You lived, say, 70 years, but it is not based on good assumptions. You will be so mad, right? You'll be very, very And that is part of a human. So sometimes you say, oh, we can't change things in India or Pakistan or America. It is because we get set in this idea. So that's the thought process. And education is not just in university, right? It is lifelong. So just because I'm that old, that doesn't mean I don't learn anymore, right? Every day you learn, right? And whatever I learned in the college is obsolete today, right? Make sense?
Yes, sir.
So I in the Delhi College of Engineering, all the calculations we did was with the slide rule in 1960. So today is just meaningless, right? So today we have so much computing power. So it is very, very different. So that's why you're always learning. So many universities focus a lot on continuing education. And many times we do that for teachers or for doctors or even for engineers. If you have a license, you have to renew the license, and that means you have to go and get more education. So every year you must take classes, right? So that you cannot practice medicine what you learned 40 years ago in a medical school, right? So you have to go back and retrain yourself. That makes sense? So there's a lot of information here. So you can see that's why we focus a lot. I did a lot of like continuing education. So you do that in companies, you do that with defense, you do that with ordinary people. So I think it almost has been 1 hour. So I appreciate your patience. So let's take a short break and then we can continue. Thank you very much.
point of related to the teaching learning is the higher application. That is in the research in the field of development. So these levels must be implemented with the different TQM techniques or lean techniques. So different levels have different requirements for the implementation of such levels or such techniques. And if we will be able to find which lean process is useful for which step of the education, then there will be a lot of improvement and innovation.
Definitely. So like we mentioned, thank you for your input. Like yesterday, evaluating PhD thesis is wasting time, but then you say, how can you get rid of it? That is not value added. You say, we can't get rid of it because we don't trust the professors. Then you have to ask the question, why don't you trust the professor? And then you can see you have to fundamentally change the system. A mistake that most people make, and it was also true with quality in the company, they think TQM or Six Sigma is like a technology that you can put in your company, a machine that you can buy, and suddenly quality will improve or education will improve. That is not true. So changing education, you can change education no matter how much TQM you apply. If students in India and their parents don't believe in critical thinking, you'll be stuck. You can't teach students if they will fight you. Many societies always have a struggle that as a teacher, can you teach values to students, or values is something that is the responsibility of the parents. So some people say, no, teacher can just teach you calculus. Like you see, all your discussion was focused on techniques. It's not focused on fundamental 4 words of education that we defined in a couple of slides back. You're talking of remembering and applying, and nothing was there in the basic meaning of the word education. So then you could evolve to an educational system that after 20 years or 100 years, you will say it is no good, because that is the important thing. So unless you fundamentally learn how to change assumptions, and you can only change assumptions if society believes in critical thinking. And if they don't believe in critical thinking, then there's no idea of changing people and modifying behavior and learning. Learning by definition means adaptation, right? If I learn, then I change my behavior after learning. If I learn but keep on doing the old thing, then learning is wastage of resources. So the hardest thing is which 5 steps that you can implement, but you have to fundamentally look at in a whole society what is education. So the way I'm talking of what is education, I can go to 50 countries and they will throw me out. They say, this is not education. You are corrupting our children by teaching them to challenge our beliefs. So that's the challenge. So TQM is not going to do anything for you. You can apply it, of course, once you have a good system, and then you will have problems, like how did you give exams, or how did you grade them. Then we say, don't give grades, don't do standardized tests. So a lot of bad things in your system are in many countries, other countries, they are already using, but they're not able to get rid of them. Purpose of teaching is not to pass a standardized test. Yes, no? You think it should be more than that, no?
Education means to change our behavior.
Our behavior, yeah.
Impact the society.
Yeah. not to pass, spends how many to go to IIT, take all the classes after 7th grade, and so that you can pass it. Nobody's teaching them how to be good citizens or how not to cheat any other fellow Indian. So that's the issue. By doing what we are doing, we'll only solve a little bit of a problem, right? It is that already I don't trust the teacher they will do a good job, right? And then you say, okay, I will have a threshold, make sure you teach them this level of calculus because it will be on the exam. So this is motivating teachers to meet some minimum standards. But meeting minimum standards is not education, right? Remember my slide where we spent so much time on, let's see, what happened. We looked at the meaning of the word education, and there's nothing here to critical thinking. There is no standardized test to measure critical thinking, right? Is there? How you can be a leader and challenge assumption and then develop a philosophy how to change society.
I want
Yeah.
to say something that I think that sometimes challenging something may be not correct if I didn't understand the basic concept of beauty. Maybe I challenge something right thing.
Definitely. That's okay. Challenging right is okay because very soon you will learn that maybe it's not bad. It is that it will reconfirm your beliefs more in that thing. But if you don't challenge ever, then deep in your mind you may always think, why do they do this? Why do they do this? But you have never analyzed it. Why do they do that?
But sometimes there is some things which are true, but they are not mathematically or scientifically true.
No,
For
no.
example, it's a Ramanujan drew some results, but still some equations are not proved yet by.
Sure.
So we should think some more advanced or something higher that maybe I was wrong that I am citing something.
Definitely. Yeah. Science has its limits. Remember I think we commented on that couple days back. A scientist can never prove anything. So that is the limits of science. Scientists can never tell you what is true. Remember we debated failure to reject is not the same thing as accept, right? Failure to reject is not the same thing as accept. So scientists can never prove anything. So that's why you don't even worry about that, that you want to prove something. Because by definition in science, we can pretend that we are proven, which is different than, and that proof is based on assumptions, and then nobody knows whether those assumptions are correct or not. Right? So that's the weakness of science. If you study classes, maybe they don't teach in India, but some university philosophy of science, and so scientists cannot prove anything. They say it. Some ordinary people say it. True scientists will never say, this is the truth, right? I know the answer. You can't say that. So that's why you have to, most hardest question is not TQM or 6. And if there is no agreement in society, what is that problem? After you have decided, oh, we are going to do standardized tests, then I could say, oh, how to make them vary in high school, the higher secondary, or maybe 100,000 students take a test. The question is, what is the right answer? So that every grading is consistent, right? One evaluator may say this is correct, other teacher may say it is not, and there is nothing like correct. Then you have to decide whether you give partial credit or not, right? then one person will give it, other person will not. So you can apply TQM at that level. You could apply TQM in hiring teachers. You could apply TQM in promoting teachers. You could apply TQM, how does the principal manage the school, about scheduling. So all the basic day-to-day things, you can optimize them. And you can say, oh, this thing is unnecessary. So there are a lot of ways you can do that. But the hardest thing was, what is the meaning of education? And then we talked about lifelong education and so on. So then, just like at my university, we teach routinely like a course on safety. So then there are probably hundreds of companies that will come, and then I can teach them, what is safety or what is reliability. So that is professional continuing education. Then you can provide a certificate, and then people can get a certification as a reliability engineer or as a safety engineer. So lifelong learning. Now a lot of e-learning is happening because with the new technology there is e-learning. Very soon people say the role of an ordinary teacher or professor will go away. Professors we don't need them. And why do I say that? No, Google. The idea is that there are some people who are very good at teaching. They may be at Harvard or MIT or India, doesn't matter. And then all you do is you videotape their lectures. Then everybody else can show their student this lecture. Then every lecture has all the references. Anytime there is a word in the lecture, you can click on it and then find references. Because one person, by spending maybe $20 million, can put all that knowledge together. And then everybody else is like a teaching assistant. So regular professor's job in another 20, 50 years will go away. Because why hire a person that you don't trust anyway in your own university? You already have world class. By world class means is that most of the people in the world believe that this professor was doing a good job of teaching. Then you have their videotapes, you have their slides, you have their homework, you have their answers, and on and on. So with technology, it can change. So job of a teacher will disappear. Just like we know that in factories with automation and robots, many people will lose jobs too, right? But similarly in education, professors, regular professors, they're not needed because most of the professors are disseminating knowledge, right? So dissemination can be done very efficiently with new technology. Creation cannot be done with new technology. Creation is the tool. Technology is the tool. So, but then you still need people's intellect to create new knowledge. So, for your grandchildren, there won't be professors like you guys. They'll go away. Society won't need them. Because all the material, all the information, everything is available. And then you can make a big impact on millions of people. Not like you could say, oh, I was a very good teacher, but you just taught 40 students in Sonipat, right? So what? But can you impact million students, right? You heard of like in USA, there is a person, Khan, Khan, and he has an academy. You can Google him. And Bill Gates gave him $100 million. So all he does is he develops video lectures on every topic that you have in high school and middle school and basic college. You say, oh, I want to learn how to do double integration. You click and then you can learn how to do double integration. So a lot of teachers, it became so popular, then smart people said this is a wonderful thing. And anybody in Africa, India, Japan, America can go. You never heard of Khan Academy? I can write. Just like Shah Rukh Khan, same idea. So that is, so what you can do is, some of you have a internet. Go ahead and Google it. Anybody wants to do that? Go ahead and on your phone. If your phone is working, you can Google Khan, and you'll find on YouTube that there are, thousands of videos, and then he can do much better job than any teacher in most of the schools. To logically teach you, you're able to find him. And what does it say? I'm sorry?
Different modules are there. Mathematics, science and engineering, computing.
So you can eliminate 1 million teachers by, looking at the database.
In India, the famous review lectures are NPTEL, connected by IITs.
Very good, very good.
They're very fruitful and helpful to present students.
Sure. But Khan cannot help you learn values and citizenship, and even to very little extent critical thinking. So those are for those you need a teacher, local teacher. Because then you can give your own personal examples, and you can look somebody in the eye and try to influence them, which is different than staring at a computer screen and learning. So there's a lot of, so these are like some of the trends in education. So people always think, old people will always talk, why you teach. Everybody has, in every Chinese culture, Indian culture, American culture, people will have philosophies of why we teach. And then you could say, how can apply, if you already have a good paradigms, good values, good way of thinking, then you can apply some of the management principles, like quality management principles, or the notion of define, measure, analyze, improve, control, transfer technology. So a lot of those ideas, you can apply them step by step to improve the efficiency of teaching and learning. You can see the exams violate basic things that we teach. Remember, exam is the feedback. I teach you, at the end of 6 months, you take a test, then I tell you whether you passed my course or not, right? And that's what we taught you. That is wrong. That is feedback, right? After 6 months, I will know whether I passed this course or not. So that is feedback, right? And we agreed, I hope some of you agreed, feedback is no good. First you wasted 6 months, and then teacher says you didn't pass, and that's very, very discouraging, right? So the idea is that as soon as a teacher uses one word or one sentence or 1 hour lecture, I should be able to assess you right away. What are you learning? Why are you not learning it? And then give you feedback. I don't have to wait 6 months to tell you that you failed my class. Make sense? But we are stuck. TQM cannot solve these problems. You understand what I'm teaching you? So that is too simplistic. So we are trying to teach you at a very, very deeper level rather than superfluous applying a method and saying, oh, quality has improved, and so on. Yeah. Because feedback has to be, even if you believe in feedback, it has to be continuous, immediate, not to wait 6 months, right? A student takes a course, they have no idea whether they'll pass or they'll fail. How could it be? For 3 months you have no idea whether you'll pass or fail. So somebody should evaluate. That's why we do that right away after 1 day of lecture. You can give homework, I could evaluate your homework. I could say whether you follow. If you don't follow, you decide whether you want to stay in this class or not, right? No reason for you to waste 6 months or 1 year to just sit. Remember we talked about that if you just sit in the class, if one student in the class is not interested, it affects the whole class. Yes, no? Because if one person is misbehaving, falling asleep, nudging their person next to us, teacher is affected. If I'm affected, everybody will be affected. That means I didn't do my best for everybody. They're not based on good foundation. Six Sigma cannot help you with your beliefs and foundation, right? That will be a very different kind of Six Sigma. But it says once you have a good belief system, then we can make you efficient. We can make you a little more productive. We can help you within that good system, help you solve problems. But what anywhere, people think it is just a technology, it is a method. They're doing fundamentally quality. So that's the basic idea. So this is like total quality management. There are certain promises that we evolve. So you can apply those in education. It says you don't try to control quality. Control means you try to stabilize it and measure the output. You don't focus on testing, like exams is the testing. I inspect the student after 1 year. But you more focus on building a good process. So you can see, I can go through all of that, but it will take hours and hours. Each bullet, I could give 1 couple-hour lecture, why we say that bullet. But the idea is that you focus on total process. Many times people say higher quality implies a higher cost. Why do typically people do that? Because they have very inefficient way to reduce variability. Remember yesterday we talked about if you make 60, 100 items, you only ship 60. Cost is very high because you're going to charge cost of 100 for 60. Now you have to normalize over 60. I make 100, ship you 1, but my production cost is to make 100, not 1, right? So people always think as cost goes up, quality goes up, right? It is not true. If you have good processes and good thinking, you can impact cost in terms of decreasing it and quality in terms of increasing it. If you develop good systems and procedures. So that's the basic idea. It says we don't focus on conformance to standards. Yeah. So like you can see, in India, all the education, at least up to some level, maybe 12th standard, is based on standardized tests. Right? An entrance exam to IIT and so on is standardized test. So these are the basic idea. So what is total quality management? You can read it later on of your own. So the main thing is it says that it is developing cultural initiative among, that means how you fundamentally change the culture of people and focus on collaboration and so on. So there are a lot of words we can use here, but we are many times repeating the same basic ideas, right? But we repeat them again and again and again. So you can say what are some of the practices, and then how you look at quality as a strategic issue, and so on. And sometimes we do, sometimes we do benchmarking. So the idea of benchmarking is like, I'm academic advisor to university in Hong Kong. So then they say, how good is our university? So you could look at another university in UK or another university in United States, and you say, what do they do? How do they elect students? What is the performance of the student? How do their alumni work, and on and on. And then you can compare with what we do. So then you can find out where are your weaknesses or where is your strength, right? So anytime you want to benchmark, that means you have to know the metrics, right? You cannot benchmark if you don't know what you're comparing. So, and then you decide, is higher number better or lower number better? So then you have to be very rational, right? You say higher numbers are better. If one university has 4, you have 3. You certainly can't say, no, I'm better than 4, right? So you have to be then very consistent. That would what mean rationality and logical would be. Your university, wherever you are, they do any benchmarking?
Credits and all. Credits for the students.
No, benchmarking. Benchmarking is done by the top management of the university, not by students. So that means you're benchmarking how does your university function compared to other university. You cannot benchmark yourself, say, against IIT Kharagpur, because Kharagpur has a very different objective. So every institution has to decide what their objectives are. And then you could compare with very similar universities. So if Kharagpur has to benchmark, they could say, oh, we could look at Madras or Delhi or Powai or Kanpur, and then say, oh, these 5 universities have a very simple objective, then which one is better, right? So that we could do. But we cannot just take Kharagpur and say, oh, we're going to evaluate them with Delhi Technological University, because they have a different mission than Kharagpur will have. So you have to decide somebody who's, what we say, who's your peer, P-E-E-R. That means who's very similar to you in terms of goals and missions and purpose. So that's the idea. And then typically in TQM, sometimes people use this Deming cycle. So Deming used to talk about plan, do, check, and act. So this is, it says, plan for something, do something, then check it, though this is a bad word, and then you act on that, and then you continue this cycle. So again, it's like Deming said, that doesn't mean it is correct. We know that checking after the fact is a bad thing to do. So I could then adapt it, change it to meet my requirement. Then you can use, all kinds of tools. There are hundreds of methods to improve quality under TQM. And then you can implement them in your own education. That's the idea. Old days, people used to talk about 7 quality tools. Remember this word I talked about, Pareto, like we wrote here, right? So Pareto was the economist who studied concentration of wealth. So the idea there is to develop priorities. It says I have 5-6 kinds of defects. But defect type A is very common. So if I wanted to improve quality, I'll focus on A rather than B, right? I don't want to suddenly have a whole big plan to focus on E or F. So like, remember we talked about where the priorities are. And you cannot develop priorities unless you know what is quality, what is not quality, and then how you measure it. And you need all kinds of data to develop those kind of things. So there are a whole bunch of methods. One of very popular thing, like remember we talked, main thing to improve quality is to do cause and effect. So Japanese taught that, they understood that. So they said, how can you make it very simple so that just like in a village, if I go to a farmer, I can teach them cause and effect. So I said, what did you want? So that is your output. So in Japan, a lot of villagers, people eat fish. So you want to then, just like, you do idol worship. So you say, oh, there's an image you need to do something. So they call it a fishbone diagram, because this is the main bone and then these are the, extensions. So they say, oh, farmer or any factory worker who may only have high school education, make a fishbone diagram. Somebody says, hey, I have quality problem. But then you say, why do you have quality problem? So then you could say, oh, it could be because of people, could be because of method, could be because of my measurement system, could be because of tools, machines, and so on. And then each one of these, you can then develop further, make a fishbone. So this way you can identify. So like in India, Modi could make a fishbone if he was smart, right? Yes, no? He could. You think he does it? Of course, he probably doesn't do fishbone, but he will do something, right? We don't know what analysis he has to do, or people under him will have to do. So this is just a simple tool, right? How to think relationship between the cause and the So this is like examples of Pareto analysis, process diagram, a scatter diagram. Anytime you say what is a cause, so cause means there is a correlation, right? So then you have to study correlation, then you have to make sure that you have this scientific basis. Just because there is a correlation doesn't mean there is a causation, right? Follow? It's like somebody says, when birds are chirping in the morning, sun comes up. So that doesn't mean birds are causing sun to come up. There's a very high correlation. That is the difference. If you go to, people who are not very educated, like Africa, like in a jungle, in Amazon, they are not very smart. So they look at pattern and think it is a causation, right? So that is their weakness. They are not able to understand it. So that's why we typically say these are myths, but there's no science behind these myths. So even in India, people have all kinds of myths. Somebody says, oh, if black Billy cross your path, like when in America, something bad will happen to you tomorrow. So maybe if a couple of people it happened, you could say, or somebody says, oh, as if the cat caused control chart, this is the example of fishbone diagram. Then people develop new tools, so like affinity. We won't go through all the list, but then you can read them up yourself. And then the idea is, if you improve quality, costs don't go up, but costs go down. You say, why is that? Because then you decrease a rework. So that means you improve productivity. If you improve productivity, you are very competitive. If you are very competitive, you will sell more, you will stay in business, you'll provide feeds itself, and things become better and better. Many cycles are opposite. So we get this vicious cycle, right? You do something bad to me, I do something bad to you, then you do something more bad to me, then I'll do something more bad to you. In the end, both of us will just kill each other. So that's the negative cycle, right? So that's the vicious cycle. So you have to figure out how to break it. Then people can give awards. Again, the awards are more to recognize some people. Then we have, like in the United States, Quality Award, National Balcom Quality Award to universities. We can give it to companies, we can give it to hospitals. So people that have good processes. So which university, then you can submit documentation, and then we could decide is your company a good company or not. So that gives you some idea. So there are so many tools. So we can't, hundreds of tools, right? Tools are just like you have a hammer and you have a screwdriver and you have a wrench. But just because you have tools doesn't mean you can engineer something good. So these are just methods that you have in the organization. So the idea is that you focus on the whole process of integration of these methods throughout the life cycle of the system. And then we talked about Six Sigma quite a bit, and I think we talked very briefly TQM issue of what is the customer. So like in TQM and Six Sigma we say, oh, quality is defined by the customer. But then education is a little bit different. Right? Like we said on Monday, my job was not to make you happy, right? I can get you more candy and you're smiling. But job is, of course, through you, I can impact your university. Through you, through your university, we can impact India. Through you, your university, India, we can impact the world. So this customer is not just you. So maybe sometimes to affect the world as a teacher, I may be very harsh on you and I can make you unhappy. But the idea is I make you unhappy because long term system will be happy. So temporary we want to, so it's a very fine balance, right? I don't want to push you too much. Then what will happen? I discourage you from studying at all. So you have to kind of play this game, kind of tweak it and then figure out what works in every society. But the objective is not to make you happy, right? Just like your parents, their job is just to make you happy. Many times they'll tell you things that you don't like at all. You get so mad, right? If you're a child and you don't understand a lot of things, right? Makes sense? A child doesn't understand many things. And child cannot relate to, if you're 4 years old or 5-year-old, to so many things. How, if you eat too much sugar, how it will affect you when you're 50-year-old, right? Child cannot make that transition. So parent can kind of be very harsh and tell the child, no, you can't do that. You cannot be rational with the child. Why? Because child has no knowledge to analyze eating candy, right? So that's the analogy. So it's very tricky what is a customer in education. So these are a couple of ideas about education and customer, and what does quality assurance mean. And then like you look at National Baldrige Educational, so this was done it's like it's not semi-government institute, National Institute for Standards and Technology. So they are kind of monitor this program or execute this program. So a lot of things we taught in this course, it says then you can apply it. So you can see that know your strongest asset. So typically we believe is the core of any university is the faculty. Yeah, nothing else matters. If you don't have good professors, then no TQM is going to help you, right? Because if professors themselves don't have knowledge or wisdom or critical thinking, nothing can help. So universities are defined by faculty. So that's why.
It's also defined by students. If the students' sketch power is small, then what professor will do?
Yeah, the idea is that if faculty is good, they will attract good students. They will attract good students. So students are not the cause. In a hierarchical sense, students are the effect. So like you are a visionary leader, even like in India, say even 100 years ago, you could take the analogy with Buddha or anybody, right? You start the leadership as a teacher, as a guru, and then students will follow you. That's the model. Yeah. And that is consistent with all the things we do in India, right? So why do many people just go to guru and so on? So it's very similar idea. It's a hierarchical thing. First, there has to be a visionary person, right? So every university has to start with some people who will say, this will what you will get if you come here to study, right? And maybe those professors even don't want people who cannot relate to what they're going to teach, right? So then there's no reason for you to go there, because both of you are not compatible. So he's right that the faculty is important, student is important, of course staff is important, buildings are important, right? Then you can go to lower level, classrooms are important, overhead projector is important for me to teach, having a good pen is important, right? But having a good pen is at very low level, right? Compared to whether a teacher has knowledge or not. So there's a lot of information. One of the main things that we don't like, which is a bad trend in all over the world, less in America than in India or many other countries. In societies like India, education has become a business. That is a contradiction. That is a contradiction. Education cannot be a business. Because if once it's a business, then all attitude will change. Then I look at a student in terms of profit and not as somebody who I'm going to transform. So you can see that is the sad thing, is that education has become a business. What you guys think about that? What I'm saying? You relate to it? How about people in the back? We have some very quiet people. So what do you think about education as a business? Looks like they don't want to talk to me.
Bad concept.
Huh?
Bad concept.
Yeah, if it is, you can all relate to it. Once it's a business, then how can business survive? Business by definition can only survive if there is a profit, right? Otherwise you'll go out of business. And now you don't have money to hire faculty or student, buy equipment for professors to teach and do research and on and on. So the deeper idea is that this is a value of the society. It is not something that you can do business. They will do cost-benefit analysis and so on. In education, you cannot do cost-benefit analysis, right? So I say, if I spend 50 years of teaching, if I can influence one person, and this person 50 years from today does something wonderful, I say it's worthwhile. My life is worthwhile because maybe this person can transform society. So that's the thought process. Not that 10,000 of my students got job with Microsoft. That's irrelevant. So it is not a business. But that trend is there. We all know why it is there. Why you think it is there?
Because there is less values in society.
Yeah.
Prefer money than values.
Could be, yeah. Lot of issues are there. So you can see, other thing you're learning is that everything is connected, interrelated. And like I've been teaching, you cannot just fix one problem and say, I apply TQM here and suddenly India will be good. Lot of things have to change. And then analysis means is that you have to relate lot of things. And if you don't do good scientific analysis of cause and effect, then people can make any slogan and win power, right? So politically I could make statements and I could go on the street and get 10,000 people marching and then change something that is fundamentally flawed in society. So these are like a couple of examples, and then there are some references given at the end of the course material. So you can, and today you can find hundreds of more references on how to apply what we taught in this class to education, education. A lot of issues, like we said, is that it will start with your definition of education, with your definition of education. So business would say, oh, you give me 1 lakh rupees, I will teach you something, whether you'll get the job or not, who knows, right? So then it's a very different model, very, very different model. Thank you for listening. We can take a short break, then we can go to the next topic. Thank you.